Pandemic has led to an unknown economic toll on millions of lives. People are struggling, people want to help, and others are looking to take advantage of both. Before panicking about your bills or giving to the latest charitable cause, you need to listen to this episode to make sure your money is going where you think it is. Our guest today is Dori Zinn. Dori has been a personal finance journalist for more than a decade, with work featured in Forbes, Huffington Post, Inc., CNET, Yahoo Finance, and more. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Pray Podcast. Dori, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray Podcast. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Can you give me a little background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am a personal finance journalist. I have been working and writing about personal finance for more than a decade. I have bylines in CNET, in Forbes, in Bankrate, Credit Karma. You might see some of my work in MSN and Yahoo, some sort of everywhere. And I write about all different kinds of personal finance. Sometimes it's about credit and debt, and sometimes it's a lot about how your identity works with your money.
Gotcha. Was there something that got you particularly interested in finance?
Well, I wasn't very good at it. So I think that when I realized how bad I was with money, my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, got me on a budget. Could you believe it? And I started working with this website, which is huge now, which is Mint. And I realized how much money I was wasting just on very frivolous things. And I was like, well, if I could do it, other people can do it. Let me help other people. And I really enjoy the stuff I write about because I really enjoy helping other people, because a lot of the time we don't know what we don't know. And so if I can just help people know a little bit more, then I feel better. So a lot of the personal finance stuff I write is very basic explainers, because my thing is always there's two things you really need in life. One is food and the other is money. And so there's never nothing to write about. There's always something to write about, because money is just such a very, very important topic.
And it's definitely one of those topics where there's money, there's scams.
Absolutely.
If you've got something that people want, they're going to try to get it from you.
Never not a scam. Never not a scam. Go ahead.
I say, is there any new scams that you have seen come out in the last couple of months? Obviously, there's a lot of COVID related stuff, but
tons of COVID scams. So where I live in South Florida, there's always a charity scam after a natural disaster. There's hurricanes here. We just saw some hurricanes on the coast of Texas and Louisiana. And every time there's a natural disaster, there are tons of scams that pop up. And so I would say be mindful of that, not just in the summer, fall months, like where I am, but also coronavirus related charity scams. Like if you are getting hit up for money because through an organization that you've never heard of that just got created, quote unquote created last week, it's something to be mindful about. And of course, there are plenty of ways to check out charities. You can check them out through Charity Navigator. You can Google them to see if they're actually if they exist, and find out where their money goes. Like when you donate, where does your money actually go? And I think that's really important now more than ever during COVID, because we have such limited financial resources. Like people are still out of work. People are still underemployed. Maybe they're furloughed. Maybe they're working part-time. They don't really have a lot of extra money, but if they want to help, the last thing you want your money to do is go to a scam.
Yeah. Charity Navigator is one of my favorite go-to places to refer people to when they're talking about charities. Because it's
oh, of course.
Hey, you want to find a charity that that has a good reputation, that raises dogs to, be service animals, you'll find one. You want to find, cats for cat ladies who don't, who they need their 45th cat. You'll find the charity.
You'll find it.
But whatever your passion is, you'll find a great charity at Charity Navigator for it.
Yeah. And then there's a couple that when I was doing some research for an article, there's Charity Navigator. There was one called Great Nonprofits. You can see GuideStar, which is like finding out a charity's like actual information about them, like their IRS documents, their annual reports and stuff like that. And then there's one called Charity Watch, which is like a watchdog. Like if somebody reports like unethical practices, or if they've been investigated, or if they have like wasteful spending. So there's like a few different ones. Like if you're like really gung-ho about looking up charities, Charity Navigator, first spot. But if you're like, let me keep digging, and if you got the time, like check out a few others, or maybe if somebody didn't have a good experience with Charity Navigator, which is very hard to believe, then maybe they want to try something else.
So what do you think about kind of those Gofundme and the sites that are kind of set up to help individuals with issues, or maybe they're sometimes for charities, but they often seem to arise when people are in the news and something has happened?
I have this belief that like most people are trying to do the best they can, but there are always people that take advantage of the system, whether the system is GoFundMe, whether the system is, any sort of donation site where you can easily give money, even through Facebook. There are people that are like, oh, let me hop on this bandwagon and see how much I can get from people. So you have to, I know that it's very easy to believe that most people are good. I believe most people are good. But you have to be very cautious when you're taking those steps to just be like, let me hand over some money. I usually will read every description. If there's any videos, make sure they're legitimate. You can, if you see the person who has created or organized the fundraiser, sometimes it's not always the person that they're raising money for. So be a little bit mindful of that. Pay attention to who's organizing it. You can also see if it says like on behalf of so-and-so or this organization or this person. If you've never heard of the story, pay attention to that. And sometimes when big stories happen, multiple GoFundMes will start because people just want to help. And it's very nice, but just check them out, see which ones, are they both legitimate? If they are both legitimate, maybe put them in contact with each other so they have one. And, don't donate to both. Don't donate to one over the other. Check them both out. See which ones are legitimate. I think it's still really important to check out bigger organizations over one-offs that pop up, especially right now. They're easier to sort of check out their paper trail and the work that they've done. So if you want, check out the ones that are legitimate, that actually can show off the work that they've done.
Yeah, I know when it comes to charities for individuals, I have a kind of a guideline for myself is that I don't give to those sort of things unless I know the person who the money's going to, or I know somebody who knows them personally.
Right. So you're 2 or 3 degrees.
Yeah,
away.
Once or twice removed. If it's it's my aunt's friend's cousin's next door neighbor's kid, I'm like, that's just too. I just don't feel comfortable. It's I don't know them. But if it's hey, I know this person and it's their best friend, I'm like, okay, yeah. I feel good about that. Or it's one of my friend's kids or something
right.
Okay, I feel good about that because I know who the individuals involved actually are, or at least trust someone who knows that person or knows the situation.
That's actually that brings up a very good point. A few months ago, I had a friend whose neighbor was removed from her home. She had 2 small kids. She literally had just had her 3rd kid weeks before. But she didn't speak English, but, my friend did. So she was coordinating some, she just needs some money if anybody can help out. And so I was like, well, she knows her personally. She knows that she is out of her house. Like, how can I help her? So it was that once or twice removed situation. And you really have to think about that when you give your money. You're like, where's this dollar going? Who is it going to? How is it split up? And with organizations that just pop up out of the blue, you really have to find that. Even whether it's for individuals, whether it's with organizations, you really have to find out where your dollar is going. Because just to part with it because you read a Facebook post, like, it's a waste of money.
Yeah, I'm always kind of concerned about those where you're like, okay, who is this entity? And if I'm giving money to them, how much money is like going to the overhead to run the entity? I hear these.
Which is important, but it's not the most important.
Correct. I mean, like sometimes you hear, the CEOs of extremely large charities making a very good living. And like
a good 6 figures, and you're like,
Well, when the charity's bringing in, $1 billion a year, you're like, okay, that's. If someone were the CEO of a corporation that was doing $1 billion a year in revenue, is that kind of comparable? Okay, I guess I can understand it. But I'm not a fan of that. But when you see the charity that like they bring in $1 million a year and half of it goes to the CEO, you're like, this sounds like it's really set up to support you and not your cause.
Exactly. And that's why you really you have to, and Charity Navigator is so good for that because you can see where their money goes. And it's really important to see. I know annual reports are boring for some people, but if you're really considering giving your money to someone or something, it's really important to check them out because you really unless you do not care about your money, which, that's a different story. But if you don't care about your money, then fine, give it away. I'll take some. But if you're not going to check people out, I'll send you my Venmo, apparently. So,
I'm always excited about those charities where like the CEO makes $50,000 a year. You're like, okay, he's like, the money's going to the cause.
I think CEOs are a really important position to cover, but it's also like, what about your directors? What about the people on the ground, your grassroots people that are out in the field recruiting? Are registering people, are actually helping people. How much are they getting? Because if you're getting $500,000 and they're getting, $500 a month or whatever, that's a really big problem. So it's important to pay the people that are doing the work. I think administrative pay is really very important. But as long as it's broken up in a way that you're comfortable with, and that's really important. If you're like, oh, the CEO makes $500,000, yeah, sure, I'll give to them. Okay, is your $20 going to the CEO or is it going to actually help people on the ground? So pay attention to that.
Yep, that's good. Are there kind of other personal finance stuff that people should be worried about? I always hear the other day I got a call from, this was actually a pretty good scam. They had the caller ID was my electric company. So they had forged the caller ID and they called and said, hey, your electric bill is past due, and the technician is on the way out to your house right now. He's going to be there in 15 minutes to disconnect your power. And I'm like, so what's my account number? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I can't give that to you. Then, well, how do you know you got the right person? Can you give me the last 2 digits of the account number? Click. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. And that's one thing that really stands out. Electric company, water company, utility companies.
Well, and especially
your
now,
phone.
During COVID where people might be struggling to make payments on this kind of stuff.
Absolutely a thing. It's so sad because you're really preying on the most vulnerable people, the people who may actually be behind and they're worried about their electricity getting shut off. Maybe their kids just started virtual school and they need the internet and you're about to shut the internet off. Like you're really preying on the absolute most vulnerable people. Like you have no heart. 1, 2, there are ways to check it out. And you actually named a couple of them. One is like, all right, well, give me my account number. And they're like, well, I can't give you that. Well, how much is my past due? When was my last? Ask the questions you know the answer to. Because if you know the answer, then they should be able to tell you the answer. So that is really like one little thing, one really, really, really quick thing. Two, I don't answer I don't answer calls. This might be for me. So if they leave a message and I'm like, oh, okay, they left a message. Let me see who they are. But I will call the number that is provided to me. Now, this is important for utilities. This is important for anybody that's trying to call your bank, like from your bank, quote unquote, from your bank. Is call the number that's provided to you, whether that's on the back of your card, whether that's on a billing statement when you log in. You know, in Florida, we have FP&L, right? Florida Power and Light. When you log into FP&L, do you have a number that you can call? I know that in certain investment accounts, they only give certain customer service numbers to people who have accounts. So you have that information. They don't like if somebody is calling you and saying, oh, you need to give us money, call the number that you get and be like, oh, hey, I got this call. My bank is very notorious. Like if we call you, it's not us. Like they're straight up. So
we're just not going to call you.
We're not. And they don't. They do send. I did get like a text that said like, can you confirm that these transactions were yours? And I was like, oh, let me log in. And I was like, oh no, these are mine. Okay, we're fine. So they are like protective in that way. But I never get calls. And if somebody calls me saying, I owe them money or I'm past due on something, I'm like, okay, thank you. And I hang up and I call the number on the back of my card or on a billing statement, because those are the ones where you'll actually reach a legitimate person. It's so sad to think that that's actually happening, but it's a very real thing.
Yeah. I mean, at least in Southern California here, a lot of the power and utility companies have specifically said, like, during COVID, we will not shut off anybody's service because of failure to pay through the end of the year or whatever it is. Yeah. So, if you're getting a phone call, find out, because there may be coverage in your area that, the utility company said, like, yeah, you might be past due, but we're not going to shut off your power. We, obviously we want to get paid eventually. But,
right.
We understand that, like, it doesn't help anyone for us to shut off your power in the middle of this.
Yeah. There was another scam that I just read about, which is like testing kits. Like, oh, you can get tested for COVID, or the ones with the immunity one, but you have to pay for it. They're all fake. There's no, like, if you, pay for this vaccine so we can protect you. No, there's no vaccine.
No vaccine.
I know you're home. I know you watch the news. I know you read the news. There's no vaccine yet. So those things are one of them. Oh, the census is another one right now. Census is super big. If somebody comes to your door and says they're from the census, that's cool. Super important. You can verify they're from the census, because, they should have a badge, and a woman actually came to my door and said she was from the census, and I knew that she was legitimate because she didn't ask for personal information that was compromisable. She's just like, she wanted me to verify my race and the people in my household and the names of the people in my household, and I think she looked at birthdays. She never asked for social security number. She never asked for bank account information. She verified this was my address, even though she was standing there. It's just questions. She's like, I'm going to ask you like 7 questions. This is fine. And I said, okay, you can fill out the census online, so you don't have to have somebody come to your door. But if you don't, and somebody comes to your door, just make sure they're legitimate. Like, look at the badge. You can actually search the census website, because they have a staff directory. So if somebody gives you their badge and you still don't believe that they're a real census person, you can look up their name, and absolutely don't give away any compromisable personal information, especially your social security number. If anybody asks for bank account information, they're stealing your identity. If anybody asks for your mother's maiden name, they're stealing your identity. So anything that can help them guess a password should raise like every single red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. What about credit repair?
Oh my gosh.
That's not, it's not something I'm super familiar with, but like, I have to admit, I'm out driving and running an errand and I see like a hand-drawn sign on a light post, just like quick credit repair. I'm like, yeah.
Which, again, people who are, preying on the most vulnerable right now because, the credit is not great when you're past due on your bills.
Yeah.
Like if you are late to payments, if you have defaults, like your credit score suffers. And so if you're trying to borrow money, if you're trying to take out a credit card, if you're trying to, get on the right track and and companies are denying you because of your bad credit score, you might look at like a credit repair company. Totally understandable. I would first look into nonprofit credit counseling agencies, which literally Google that term. You will find the ones that are nonprofit, they're accredited, and they will help you with your credit. And most of the time, they will help you with a payment plan. In some cases, they will negotiate with your creditors for like a settlement cost. They'll pay it out for you and you pay them monthly or whatever payment plan you set up. And they're very, very helpful if you get the legitimate ones. Don't pay for anything upfront. Usually, like you shouldn't have to pay for anything upfront. If they do require something upfront, I think that's a problem because like they haven't really proven that they've done anything yet. If it's credit counseling agencies, they'll usually work in a fee with your monthly payment to them. So depending on your pay setup. So if you pay the credit counseling agency $400 a month, random number, that fee gets dispersed to all of the people you owe outstanding money to. And then a portion of that goes to pay them. A lot of times you just need to get set up on a budget. You're like, okay, what do I need to pay off first? And nonprofit credit counseling agencies are almost always free in that regard. So you shouldn't have to pay for it. But if somebody's like, oh, credit repair, we can fix it, we can get this off. No, like don't pay anybody to do that. And a lot of times, like if you have a bank account, they'll work with you. Or if you have a credit card, they'll work with you. Like if you are behind on payments, you might just need a little bit of a proactive step to be like, hey, I lost my job, or I'm in between jobs, or I got, I don't have enough money to make this. How can we set up a system to where my credit doesn't suffer, you don't charge me late fees, so on and so forth. And usually they'll work with you.
Yeah. So is it kind of thing with like the credit repair places that if they can't explain exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it, that should be like a huge red flag?
Similar red flags as like people who call you for personal information. Like if you can't verify that the company exists, whether there's like a Google is free. Okay. It is free 99. Use it to your advantage. Google everything. Like it's the best tool. Google is the best tool you should have. So, if the company doesn't exist, obviously red flag. If you get a phone call from a credit repair company, which could happen, or a text message like, hey, give us a call, we will help you. Google the number. Where does the number take you? If somebody calls you, ask for a callback number. And you can always say like, oh, well, give me a callback number in case you get disconnected, which is a fine thing to say, but it's almost always to say, I want to verify that this company exists. So it's used to Google. And if you call back and it's some random company, or you call back and it's like a dead line, red flag everywhere. So I would definitely pay attention to those, but also the fees is really important. Like you really shouldn't be paying upfront fees. And you really should, if anybody promises you like, oh, we'll remove these points from your credit report, like that you should really sort of pay attention to, because that almost always can happen. You can get things removed from your credit report. You can get things removed from your credit report. Like if they're bad and you have to prove that they're bad marks, it's really not something that a fake credit reporting agency can do.
So kind of like if someone, you have proof that you made your payment on time, but the credit card company is saying the payment was late, that's something that you can argue.
Oh, they took your money.
Yeah.
Well, a credit. Well, that's even more so if you paid somebody to do it.
Well, no. I was referring to. Oh, yeah,
results.
yeah. But like if there's derogatory lines on your credit, and you know it's because, well, I know I made that payment on time. I can prove I made that payment on time. That's fairly easy to dispute with the credit reporting agencies. Correct?
Yeah, credit bureaus, the three major credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, will remove things that you can prove you either didn't do that are false, maybe that aren't you. Like if you have the same name as somebody and maybe you guys live in the same city, like it might be easy to get something on your report that's somebody else's mistake. So as long as you can prove that it wasn't you, then that's your step. But it's better to do it DIY. Like, don't pay somebody else to do it. If you do need help, there are legitimate companies out there, the nonprofit credit counseling agencies that will help you, that care about you. Please don't fall for the ones that just want your money.
Mm-hmm. It's going to look for the people who are going to train you, educate you on how not to make the same mistakes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really important steps, because if you just give your money to somebody, they take it, and you have no idea if your money went to the right place. Like, did you learn anything? Like, it's really important to sit down with like financial professionals and say, okay, how do I get better? Like, this is the money coming in. These are all my bills. These are the necessities. Like, help me sort of figure this out. And you can talk to a credit counseling agency. You can talk to a financial coach. You can talk to your bank. You can talk to a planner. Some of those require money. Some of those don't. Sometimes you just need to talk about money, like with your partner, with your family. Like, sometimes just talking it out rather than just letting your bills pile up is a good step.
Yeah, I know. At least in the U.S. and probably most elsewhere, talking about money is kind of this taboo, unless you're going around saying, "Look how much I have." Aside from that, like talking about money problems is very taboo in the U.S.
Very, and I think it's getting better, because I know when I grew up, we didn't talk about money. My family didn't talk about money, and I think. And earlier when I told you, you're like, how did you get into it? Well, I didn't know how to deal with my money. And that comes directly from growing up in a home that doesn't talk about money. Even if you talk about how much money you don't have, you still are talking about money, which is an important thing. And so if you just talk about it, if you're like, hey, let's go over some things. I know in my house, we talk about money constantly. Hey, did you know that this bill is coming up? Yep, I got it on my calendar. Yep, it's auto pay. Oh my God, auto pay is like the best lifesaver. You set up auto pay, you don't have to worry about it unless like your card closes or something like that. You really don't have to worry about it. But simple communication will go a very long way.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things my wife and I talk consistently about our finances. Where are we at? How are we doing?
The best households will talk about money. I know it's hard because, again, you don't know what you don't know. But if you are like, I don't know, your next sentence should be, let me find out.
Let's figure this out. Let's find out how to do this, or let's find out what it is, or maybe we know someone who's really good at this who can.
Exactly. And that's such an important thing, because the second you talk about it, it's out in like the universe. And if you don't know somebody that can help you, maybe somebody else knows somebody that can help you. And that's something you would do on a normal basis, right? Like, oh, I need my AC fixed. Do you know a guy? Like, oh, I need a budget. Do you know a guy? Like, it's just, your community is there for so many purposes. It's really important to tap into them when you need it.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So is there any parting advice that you would have for our listeners today on either things, red flags that should watch out for, or things they are probably not doing they should start doing with respect to finances?
Oh my gosh. I think we had mentioned this about getting a password manager, because they will save you time, energy, headaches, heartaches, so many things. And then when you're looking up, whether you're looking up charity stands, whether you're looking up investment stands, whether you're looking up identity stuff, like keep in mind, like don't just I know that like we talked about, you want to believe that everybody has a good heart, and most people do, but there's still some people out to get your money. So just vet them. Literally just go through. We talked about Charity Navigator. We talked about the free Google. Google is free until Google is not free, which hopefully is never. Use it to your advantage. And talk to people about money. Like, they probably understand more than you think.
And if people want to follow you on social media or read about what you're writing, how do they find you?
You can find me on the Twitter at Dori Zinn, DORIZIN.
Great. Thank you so much, Dori. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with the audience today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know and leave a review by visiting easypray.com/review. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Dori Zinn can be found at easypray.com/34.